Welcome to this second tutorial in which we're looking at architecture, and in particular the von Neumann architecture. Now what we're looking at the screen is the diagram from the first video, which looks at the CPU, the basic components. Now we're going to start to look a little closer at this, and we're going to start with the what's called the bus. Now, or buses rather, because they're plural. Now, all information within a computer system, sort of from the control unit to the ALU to the registers to the output to the input and main memory, they all require some means of communicating with each other, and what we use are what are called buses. Now, they're just communication pathways, and there are several communication pathways that we need to look at. We will be looking at three, and so if we look at this diagram, well, we've got CPU, memory, input, output. Now, so if I go back to our diagram there's the CPU, and so we are going to focus on how communications between the CPU, memory, and input and output devices happens. Yeah. Now, all of buses, the definition, a bus is a set of parallel wires connecting two or more independent components of a computer system. For example, the CPU, central processing unit, and memory need to be connected so that communication signals can be passed between them. Of course. Okay, and they're physical connections. Yeah, physically, if you look closely enough with a big enough magnifying glass or a microscope, you would see that actually they are physical wires. Very thin, of course, very small, but they're still physical connections, and they enable physical signals to happen. And the three buses that we need to look at, or the system buses, are the data bus, the address bus, and the control bus. So, let's see what these three do. Well, starting with the control bus, now we can see with the control bus that there's communication in both directions between the control bus and the CPU, the control bus and memory, and the control bus and input and output. Now, arguably, the control bus is the most important bus in the system because it does what its name says. It controls communications between the various components. Yeah, so the control bus carries signals that control the actions of the computer. For example, our system needs to constantly read and write data to and from memory. Yeah, and the system needs to know whether it needs to read data from memory or instructions, or whether it needs to write data to memory. Yeah. Now, without the correct signal from the control bus to memory, the system wouldn't know whether it needs to read or write. That's just one example. So let's move on. Well, we then have the address bus. Now, if we look at the address bus, we can see that information passes from the CPU to the address bus, so that's called unidirectional, one direction. The address bus communicates with memory in one direction, so the address bus passes signals to memory, and the address bus also has a communication to and from input and output devices. Now, so let's have a little closer look at this. What does the address bus do? Well, it carries addresses. That's why it's called the address bus. Addresses from memory or from RAM. Yeah. So it carries addresses from the processor to main memory or other input-output devices. For example, your monitor or your mouse. It's one direction or unidirectional. And this is what happens. The processor generates an address, so the CPU generates an address, passes it to the address bus, then all the data instructions are returned on what are called the data bus. So let's have a look at the data bus. Right. Now, if we look at the communications with the data bus has communications to and from the CPU. It has communications to and from memory, and it has communications to and from input device. So, information travels both directions. So, what's it do? Well, the data bus, as you might expect, the data bus carries the data or instructions from main memory to the processor, or from other secondary devices to the processor. It's bidirectional, it's two ways, and data can be read and written. Yeah, so the data bus, all it does, it just passes data and instructions. That's all it does. In order to be able to do that, it needs to know which address to use, so hence it uses the address bus, and the control bus lets the address bus know what information is needed. Okay, so we've looked at greater detail at what the CPU does. There we are, there's our diagram of the CPU, and we have looked at the control bus, the address bus and the data bus. Collectively they're known as system bus or the system buses, and remember they are just wires that connect the various devices together. Thank you.